Hi there, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst with the Center for Digital Intelligence, and I want to thank everyone out there for joining us today. I'm so excited because I have a brilliant futurist as guest today. I want to just invite you guys to meet Frank. Frank, why don't you introduce yourself? Frank Diana from Tata Consultancy Services.
No, thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that great introduction. As you said, Frank Diana from Tata Consultancy Services. I'm a futurist, and I spend most of my days focused on where the world is heading, what that might mean to not just business and governments, but society in general, and what we might do about how this is all playing out, and maybe actually help create that future.
And guys, everyone out there, I'd invite you to find the blog from Frank Diana's blog. It's brilliant. I follow it. I get notices every time there's a new article there. So I would encourage all of you guys to follow it. He has some incredible insights. One of the newest blog articles he put out there is actually kind of a book review of a new book by the authors of The Second Machine Age, which is one of my favorite books. And Andrew McAfee and Eric Brynjolfsson, I think is how you say that. And the new book is called Machines, Platforms, and Crowds, Harnessing Our Digital Future. So Frank, if you could, let's just talk about that a little bit. I know the authors call out really three big trends there. Again, machines, platforms, and crowds. Talk to us about what you think. Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? What's the impact of the machines on our future?
Well, I absolutely agree with them. I think those three things, machines, platforms, and crowds, really capture a lot of what's happening out there today. And I love the relationship pairs that they created in the book. So machines are paired up with minds, the product and platform comparison, and then the crowd and the core being the institutional knowledge that we build into our organizations versus all that knowledge that's available through the growing crowd, if you will. So that's a great way to view the kind of relationships that are forming and how those the machines, platforms, and crowds will really change the latter in that relationship. So a great way to think about it. I think they do a great job of creating examples that speak to each, and that's how the book is structured. They talk about each of those pairs as they go. And one of the fascinating pieces of the conversation that I found was the decentralized autonomous organizations that many speak about, whether it's blockchain enabled or AI that supports it, and the economic structures around firms and whether that's even a viable path forward.
Let's talk about that. Matter of fact, I found that as one of the most interesting points you were calling out there. Now, why would these emerging digital technologies actually perhaps be destructive to a traditional firm structure?
Well, if you think about firms versus markets, and they speak to this in the book, how markets, why do we need firms? You know, if markets can, as individuals, we can do things in the marketplace itself. And they speak to the fact that markets have a lower cost of production, but firms have a lower cost of coordination. And so that's a really interesting point when you think about what digital technology is doing. And in effect, it's facilitating coordination and communication and collaboration and all those things. And so does it sort of level that playing field between the market and the firm? And does it start to tilt the balance in the interest of the market versus the firm? And then that begs the question in the context of what is the firm in the future? Is it required? Is it needed? And the follow-on to that is the whole blockchain decentralized organization conversation.
It does change so much out there. Matter of fact, I'm in the middle of publishing a series of 9 videos from Silicon Valley, and where I'm interviewing various, veteran CEOs and CTOs and things of all the startup environment there in Silicon Valley. And in almost every case, these guys don't try to build giant structures and with capital investments and buildings and data, server farms and all this. No, they're using platforms. And they're organizing, and they're using all these kinds of things. So you can put together an entity, a startup, very rapidly and invest very little. So the whole structure of the firm looks different today.
Yep, and platforms is really the term, and that's the biggest one in my mind, because the quote now that it's getting more famous: platforms will eat pipelines versus software.
Yes.
Right? And so platforms and that business model and its ability to scale, and its blurring of the boundaries across any industry, because as a platform emerges, value creation and capture has no regard for industry. And so what does it do even in that context to traditional firms and traditional industry? So platform, a big piece of that.
Oh yeah, so things are moving so much quicker. The pace, the operational tempo, the rapid pace of change is accelerating out there, and I think you and I are both writing on that subject a lot. And you coined a phrase that I was reading about the other day on your blog: the combinatorial nature of digital building blocks. How things can be innovation is accelerated today because of this combinatorial nature of digital building blocks. Can you share with us that concept?
Well, yeah, and first, it really wasn't my term. It came out of that book, The Second Machine Age. That's the first time I saw combinatorial used. Uh,
Okay.
and they spoke to, in the book, the fact that these building blocks exist and can be combined in ways where value creation occurs very rapidly. So instead of having to invent everything, the long process, it's a very rapid process of building blocks that combine to create value. And if you think about that, it really is one of the foundational elements of the pace phenomena. And we can just look at so many different examples dating back to the smartphone in 2006 and how rapidly things have moved. And I think it was the authors of the Second Machine Age that said that they were actually conservative in their estimates when they wrote that book. And of course, that book was provocative when it was written. And so they turned out to be conservative. So again, that building block phenomena is just accelerating the pace. And I think the pace phenomena is the biggest challenge for world leaders.
And so, how do companies actually respond to that? Because us humans are kind of working on a biological time scale, right? 24 hours a day. We have our lifespans we're working with. We need to sleep at night. We need to eat at night or eat during the day. So, we have these biological limitations that we have. Yet, the world seems to be accelerated into a digital space where the time frames are condensed so much quicker that it's beyond a human capability. That kind of brings us into the age of automation, doesn't it?
It sure does. Well, first and foremost, the linear constructs of our day, us humans and our structures and institutions, really all linear. And as you said, everything really is now on an exponential clock. And so what does that do to us in the context of can we keep up? And it does start to tip the scales towards machines, as we know, because they can start to deal with this in ways that humans can't. And obviously, as artificial intelligence and advanced robotics continues to explode and continue to learn, and I've been using the example of Sophia, the human robot, the now Saudi Arabia citizen, as a really great example of where all this is going, because that's a combination of artificial intelligence and advanced robotics in a way that actually creates a companion. I mean, it's just amazing when you watch the facial expressions on Sophia. So, yeah.
Oh man, yes. And so you wrote recently an article on taxing robots because there's really, genuine concern out there that over time this automation and artificial intelligence will start replacing humans in the workforce, and there will be increasing unemployment. What's your thoughts there?
Well, the unemployment question comes up in every forum that I talk in, and that's an obvious question in terms of what is automation going to do to jobs. And I actually, there's two recent discussions that I tapped into. Rohit Talwar is a futurist out of the UK, and he wrote a really good piece on robot taxes. And then follow on, although an earlier one was Bill Gates and a video of his interview on robot taxes. And so there are two sides to every discussion, right? The robot tax discussion, the universal basic income discussions around what do we do if automation really does displace many humans, are all good discussions that we should be having in the context of what do we do about these scenarios. But there's pluses and minuses to everything. Robot taxes, in effect, could squash some level of innovation if people shy away from innovating because of the tax associated with that, right? So we have to really think about these things carefully, and it brings up the balance discussions that I have in every forum. The ethics discussions that go on today around some of these things, the balance required to ensure that we move innovation forward for all the positive things it will drive, but avoid the unintended consequences. Not easy stuff.
Oh yeah, and I just read this week, matter of fact, that Google is creating a language or an automated algorithm that can look at processes and automatically create automation on its own. So you have an automated system creating automation on its own. And so I'm thinking to myself, how do you interject your belief systems and purpose and balance and all that into a system that's actually being created by a different system and no humans are involved?
Yeah,
Now
well,
that really starts getting complex.
it sure does, and there's no governance mechanisms in place today. I speak a lot about the fact that today there are a lot of techno-philanthropists out there that spend their massive wealth on advancing the path of these science and technology, and there really is nothing in place to gate it. Now we've heard Elon Musk speak out about the path of AI and the need for regulation. And there are others like Girdley and Hard out of Europe that's been speaking a lot about the path of science and technology, and do we need institutions in place to govern it? All these things are issues that I think society is going to wrestle with quite a bit in the next 10 years.
Oh, absolutely. And I just hope that we get to a point where we can focus on these in advance and not have to be cleaning up a mess before we have the focus and the attention to deal with it.
Yeah, proactivity would be great. Unfortunately, that pace phenomenon that we spoke to,
Yes.
one of the questions that I wrestle with in my mind is, has the pace phenomena caused us to have an inability to govern going forward? Because we've got so many issues with pace at the business level, let alone thinking about the regulatory constructs and the policies and all the things that really will be challenged by this exponential versus linear world.
So Frank, in a lot of my most recent research projects that I've been working on, there's this kind of theme keeps coming up, which is some people are jumping in and embracing a digital mindset, and others are just simply resisting every part of it. And the gap between digital leaders and digital laggers is increasing, not closing. How does a company actually keep themselves up and adopt a digital mindset?
Yeah, it's been a struggle that I hear leaders speaking to all the time. And it likens back to the days of electricity in the second revolution, when it took 40 years for electricity to really have the impact that it had in the productivity numbers and in other ways. And it really was the new generation of leaders that came in that made all that happen. And I hope that we don't have to deal with that kind of thing again. But there is a struggle in organizations today with an older generation, and not just an older generation, but in a large part of the older generation that struggles with new technologies. And with the best of intentions, organizations try to drive productivity with these new approaches, but there's a resistance among the organization. And that's a challenge that has been out there for quite some time. And it's a real strong challenge. And you hope that it doesn't take another generation of leaders to overcome this, but it might be that way.
Got it. Well, Frank, I want to thank you so much. I know you're busy, and I also want to congratulate you on being a grandfather.
Right. Thank you.
And I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone else that joined us today.
Take care.